Hello there, this is Cool Talk. Today we review Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. Some say it is his masterpiece. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It was nominated for Best Picture at the 2011 Oscars. But for other people, it was an embarrassing bore that some movie theaters even posted signs warning viewers that if they walked out early, they were not going to get their money back. So, is it a masterpiece or a bore? How could a movie be so polarizing? Let's find out. It starts with a flame, and then a quote from the Bible from Job 38:4-7. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you think you understand who laid the cornerstone. When the morning stars joyfully cried out together, and the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, this quote is important for what is to come. We first see a little girl looking out at nature, and she says in a voiceover that the nuns taught her that one must choose the way of nature or the way of grace. Nature only wants to please itself. It finds reasons to be unhappy, while the world shines around it. Grace accepts insults and injuries, but no one who accepts grace ever comes to a bad end. The little girl grows up to become Mrs. O'Brien. She is played by actress Jessica Chastain. She is following the way of grace. Mr. O'Brien has chosen the way of nature, dominating, unyielding. He is played by Brad Pitt, and they have 3 sons. Note, director Terrence Mallick also had 2 brothers. It is the 1950s, and in the film, water represents emotions, whether it's gushing or being suppressed. Okay, so now we flash forward to the 1960s. The O'Briens receive a telegram. Their middle son, R.L., has died. He was 19, and the couple is devastated. The O'Briens can find no solace, despite others trying to console them. Mrs. O'Brien wonders why. Why, if she followed the way of grace, did this happen to her? Much like Job, she questions God. And now we flash forward again to 2010, where the oldest son, Jack, played by Sean Penn, is going through a midlife crisis. It is the anniversary of his brother's, R.L.'s, death. He barely speaks to his wife. He wanders aimlessly through a building and ponders. And now the movie has a flashback. Probably the biggest flashback in the history of movies. It is the beginning of time, and for over 20 minutes, we see lights, solar flares, planets, stars, the earth, volcanoes, water animals, dinosaurs, an asteroid that destroys the dinosaurs, trees, and finally, us. We're back in the 1950s. The O'Briens are in love, frolicking. He is apparently a veteran, maybe he fought in Korea. They marry. They have a baby. They are happy. And this is baby Jack. Then there's Jack as a toddler. Then along comes baby brother R.L. Jack is confused, a little jealous. Then a third son is born, Stephen. The boys grow, and they favor the mother. She is Grace, kind, fun. She appreciates the wonders around her. Dad is nature. He's tough, disciplined. The boys don't know it at first that he is resentful. He wanted to be a musician. He is a geological engineer trying to sell patents to bring some extra cash into the family, but he fails over and over. The middle son, R.L., plays the guitar, and he joins his dad, and they bond over music. Older son Jack is jealous. He shoots R.L. in the finger with a BB gun, but he is immediately sorry. Now, the mother would do things like point at the sky and say, "That's where God lives." She tells the boys of her experience riding an airplane many years ago. And we see her floating around, flying, which makes no sense, but this is all a bunch of memories that the older Jack is putting together in his mind. His images are of his mother flying. There are ugly moments. If the boys get out of hand, Dad lashes out. Mom is mostly passive, but in one instance, she covers his mouth and he restrains her. Yeah, it's rough, but I commend the movie for not pulling punches. Parents, especially fathers of the 1950s and 60s, were strict to a fault. No nonsense. And Mallick doesn't take sides. He observes. And I'll add that almost everybody can remember ugly instances and family squabbles from their childhood. What did you say?
Come here! Come here!
Yeah, it was the years when men would tip their hats to the ladies and then discipline the families at home. Now, oldest son Jack is already in a rebellious stage. He begins to take an interest in girls. He has a crush on a girl at school. Then he sees a neighbor in her nightgown through her bedroom window. He sneaks in later, steals a nightgown, but then he panics and throws it in the river. Now, we also see a scene where he watches his mother in a nightgown. Yes, adolescence can be a confusing time. Mr. O'Brien loses his job at the plant. He feels defeated, a failure. He thinks that there's a beautiful world out there that he had foolishly neglected to notice. He neglected Grace. We see him by a dry wall, no water. His emotions are checked in. Then he goes home, opens up to his wife and his son, and recognizes his faults. In the background, there is water flowing. Emotions are flowing. He apologizes to Jack, and they hug. It is now 2010. Middle-aged Jack is done pondering the past. He is still distraught. He lights a candle in memory of RL. It doesn't help. He touches water. He needs to follow the way of grace. Then he ponders the future, and he sees himself in a desert. He sees himself as a child. He reaches the ocean, sees RL. He sees other family members, mom, dad, strangers seeking out their loved ones. The mother kisses an old hand, and it becomes young. Then some woman dressed in white guide Mrs. O'Brien, and she finally accepts that God was taking her son. She says, "I give him to you." As the visions end, we see Jack leaving a building and giving a small smile as if he had finally accepted grace. Now, mixed in with these visions is a glimpse of the future, with the sun engulfing the earth, as if to say that in the universe's journey, our problems and even our lives are small. We see a flame again. The end. Now, Terrence Mallick says that the movie is not autobiographical, but he did have a brother who died, like RL, and his brother also played the guitar. Now, in the movie, when the O'Briens get the telegram notifying them of RL's death, the camera lingers for a moment in RL's room where we see a guitar propped up. And what does RL stand for? Now, Mallick's brother's name was Larry. Is RL a sort of reverse of the consonants in Larry's name? I have no idea. Not much is told to us about the third son, Stephen. He's kind of like a third wheel here, but we do know that Terrence Mallick did have a third brother. So while not autobiographical, the movie is at least very personal for him. Now, Mallick had only done 5 movies in 38 years. He had dreamed of making The Tree of Life for decades. So after The Tree of Life, he filmed 4 movies and a documentary, all in a row, as if he needed to get The Tree of Life out of his system so he could cut loose. The movie has voiceovers, little dialogue. It's a collage of images, many questions unanswered. One movie critic says, "We are not meant to watch The Tree of Life. We are meant to experience it, to let the film take you in." Okay, but how do we do this? And here is my consensus. There are 3 films here. The 1950s, which was the best sequence. For me, it gets 5 out of 5 stars. Then we have the birth and evolution of the universe, which was impressive, but it came out of left field. It felt abrupt, like we were watching a documentary within a drama. It felt disjointed. I gave it 3 stars. The Sean Penn sequence where he barely speaks and we never hear a word from his wife is unbearably boring, and I give it 0 stars. Add them up and we get a C, which is hardly a masterpiece. But this is misleading because there are greatness in some of the parts, and some of the parts do reach the level of masterpiece, reaching more than a 5 unto themselves. It's a very unusual film, open to interpretation. Now, at the beginning of the movie, we see a sunflower standing tall among many. Later on, we see many sunflowers, but they're the same height, uniform. Grace demands that we include others. The movie does not shy away from religious imagery. Mallick is a Christian, and he also studied philosophy. When the mother gives birth to Jack, we get glimpses of women in white guiding children. One little boy is pushed toward a gaping hole. He enters. Then he swims up through a child's room through water, and Jack is born. For me, this represents angels guiding souls into babies' bodies. Now, the performances are all outstanding. The message that we are perhaps insignificant compared to the rest of the universe, I think the message was kind of heavy-handed. The movie's a little bit elusive, for many people hard to understand. And I'm going to give a last 2 points, though. The little girl at the beginning of the movie is carried by her father, and he resembles her future husband quite a bit. And now my last point. In the dinosaur sequence, we see 2 dinosaurs. One is hurt by the side of the stream. The other runs by and stops and puts one foot on the wounded dinosaur's head. But then it doesn't crush it, it just runs away. Does this mean that grace won over nature? Maybe. It could also mean that nature established its dominance over grace and moved on. Who knows? Now, The Tree of Life is on many lists of one of the best films ever made. Some hated it, some people feel it's a case of the emperor has no clothes, and others feel that it's a cinematic miracle. You be the judge. I, for one, appreciated it more than I loved it. And now, for the next Terrence Mallick film, we're going to look at To the Wonder with Ben Affleck, Olga Kurilenko, and Rachel McAdams. But in the meantime, tell me what you think. Comment below, send me your likes, or better yet, subscribe. This is Cool Talk.